Hello and welcome to Digitech. Today we're going to be making a hot chocolate ordering sort of app to practice taking input and output. And we're also going to be using the if statement functionality of Svelte to change what the page says depending on what the user has written in, and it'll be a bit more reactive. This one is a great project for just getting to know the if statements in Svelte because they can be a little bit unusual, but we'll get a bit of a handle on them through this. In this project, you'll watch me struggle to spell chocolate multiple times, and this one's a bit longer because we're going to go through multiple different versions. Each time we add a new feature, we're going to commit, and so by the end we'll have like a string of commits of a progressively more completed project. So as we do in Visual Studio Code, the first thing is to install all the dependencies and get all that node stuff in there. It's necessary, and you just get used to it. It'll download everything from that package.json, which contains heaps of comments if you're ever interested in what's in there. I think the package.json has comments in it, I can't remember now. The other one, which says how to do everything, which should pop up in just a second, the rollup.config, that one contains everything if you want to have a look at that. So after we've done this, deleted the starting part of the project, we'll just add in a heading to get started and know what project we're actually working on, keep a reminder. And the first thing is we're going to need some inputs, and we're going to start off with labels this time because we know what the inputs are going to be. The inputs are going to be a name and the temperature that they want to drink. So we'll give them appropriate labels. And once the labels are in there, we can start putting in inputs. Name obviously going to be text, and you don't actually have to put text in there, but I like to just to make sure it's super clear. And the second one is another input. However, this one's going to be slightly different in that it is a range, which is a slider style input where you can like slide it up and down to give number inputs. It's just a bit easier, a bit more intuitive for the user. Instead of typing in exactly what temperature they want, they can kind of slide it to the hot end or slide it to the cold end. And it looks like our testing is working. You can type in, you can move the slider around. So the HTML part is basically done for this part. Then now it's to put in a bit of JavaScript. We'll use the name variable for the name, and naming the variables clearly makes life a lot easier as your code gets more and more complex. Trying to find what a variable actually does becomes really, really important to be able to kind of glance at it and know, oh yeah, cool, that variable is storing a string and it's called name, it's probably storing the user's name. And for the temperature range, you could use whatever you want, but I'm going with a nice short sharp temp. And instead of empty quotes, we're going to give this one an initial starting value of 20. I'm not sure how that relates to an actual hot chocolate, whether that's hot or not. I feel like a swimming pool that's 20 degrees is really cold. So I guess a hot chocolate that is 20 degrees is cold as well. With the range input though, we're going to add min and max just so that with the numbers that we're getting from that input, when you go all the way to the left it's 0, and you go all the way to the right it'll be 100. That just puts some nice bounds on it, some data validation, so the user can't put in like a literal frozen chocolate, and they can't ask for chocolate steam, I guess it would be, over 100 degrees. And at the moment with our testing we have no idea what those variables are, so we'll just put in a paragraph to output what they are and see what they're doing. At the moment it just says hi blank, your drink is 20 degrees because 20 degrees is the initial value for that temperature. And then when you move the slider, it moves the drink temperature as well, the degrees. So that's our initial version. Like, it's pretty basic, but it's also kind of, I wouldn't say fully functional, but functional. We've got our minimum basic thing where it takes a name and a temperature and outputs what that order is. So next we're going to use the if statements because I didn't really like how the paragraph was always there even if you hadn't typed in a name. That kind of high space comma looked a bit weird. So I decided to put in an if statement using Svelte. And this is where Svelte becomes really powerful because you can put the JavaScript directly in with the HTML and say, I only want this HTML to show up if the name is longer than 0. Initially thought not equal to 0, but then it looks nicer if you just say the name.length is greater than 0. Tab that in to make it look nice. And end the if statement. It looks a bit weird, which I spotted, and change the bracket type. Looks a bit nicer. Cool, so now that message doesn't pop up unless you've typed in a name, which makes a bit more sense in terms of functionality. Next up, we need more emojis in this project for sure. So I think we're going to add in some temperature evaluation for the drink temperature, kind of just judge the user on what their temperature is. So if the temperature is less than 40 degrees, we're going to call it fairly tepid. If that, yeah, we're kind of judging them if they want a cold chocolate, but whatever, we're the programmer, we get to do that. So put in a nice cold emoji. And I accidentally pressed enter and it auto-completed a bunch of CSS. I'm not sure why I did that, but just delete that out. And then an else if. So if it's less than 40, it's going to be tepid. If it's greater than 90, it's going to be very, very hot. You would have noticed it auto-corrected or auto-completed some weird HTML stuff. That's just VS Code getting a bit confused because we're starting to mix JavaScript with HTML and the file name is .svelte and it's just that's too much for VS Code. But we can spot it and correct it as needed. Last case, we've done too cold, we've done too hot. Last case is good. I actually have no idea if these values are actually good. I have no idea. I feel like a 90-degree hot chocolate would be really, really hot, but I'm not too sure. And we just need to do /if. This is kind of like the closing bracket at the bottom of an if statement, except you have to be a bit more specific that you're closing off the if statement. And it doesn't look right. There's like a wriggly line underneath the else, and the code is not working. You can see we've got no emoji evaluation there at all. Everything's working apart from the if statement. So there's something wrong there. And under the problems tab, you'll notice there's a little 1 there. And it said unexpected token on line 26. Hovering over that, I missed the colon before the else. A bit of Svelte syntax there that I forgot to do. So the if statement should start with a hashtag if, and then all of the stuff in the middle like else if and else is all starts with colon. And then the last one is a /if, which is a bit like HTML, I guess, when you're doing a closing tag. So now the emojis are working, and things are looking pretty good. I didn't like that the evaluation shows up all the time. So similar to before, we only want it to show up if they finish typing in the name. So I'm just going to move the closing if statement on that name length thing and tab everything in. So now you can see that if the name is longer than 0, then it starts to tell you what your order is and then judge you for it. Looks pretty good. We'll call that a version and commit it. You can see all the code that we've added. And it only outputs once they've actually typed in their name. So now in terms of Svelte features, we've done input with the name and the range slider, and we've done output to that paragraph using those same variables that are bound to the input. And then we've also done an if statement to output only when the user has kind of started to input, and there's some interactivity with the page there. Okay, next thing, what did I do next? I can't remember. I think I decided that we needed to cater for an international crowd and include Fahrenheit temperature. So I'm going to just right click on that variable name and change all instances. So you can see all of the examples of temp are changing at the same time, so you don't need to go through and find every time you've used that variable. And now it says temp C for Celsius. And we're going to add in a temp F for Fahrenheit. So if you think I couldn't spell chocolate before, just wait till you see me try and spell Fahrenheit. It's an absolute disaster. We're going to have a look at this Svelte docs because we want the Fahrenheit temperature to automatically calculate every time the Celsius temperature changes. And Svelte can handle that for us with this $: syntax. It's actually a part of normal JavaScript, but no one really uses it. But Svelte has hijacked it and used it so that every time so you create a variable with the $: syntax, and if it's calculated off another variable, it'll get recalculated every time that variable changes, which is a complicated description, but you'll see it in action. So our temp F for Fahrenheit is going to be recalculated every time the temp C changes automatically. I couldn't remember exactly what the formula was for changing to Fahrenheit because I never do it, and here's the first example of me struggling. And down here in one of the cards, it just looks like it's times 9/5 plus 32. 9/5 is a bit of a pain to do in code, so I'm sure there's just a decimal for that. 1.8. I'm not sure why they couldn't just use 1.8 before. So our variable will be temp C times 1.8 plus 32. Looks good. And then in our output to the user, we're just going to tell them what the temperature is in Fahrenheit alongside what it is in Celsius. Looking at that, it didn't look exactly right. I'm just staring at it at the moment, just for like, what? And it turns out I need to be a bit more smarter with my brackets, because I need to write out a normal bracket and then use curly brackets for this Svelte variable thing. Here again, really struggling, couldn't remember Fahrenheit at all, and got frustrated and decided to just Google it. Ironically, when I Googled it, I spelled it correctly, and was even more frustrated when I realized I had spelled it correctly, and decided to just copy and paste it. Don't forget it's multiple degrees. Looks good. Saved that. Type in the name, and when you change that, we should get automatically recalculating that degrees Fahrenheit. Now notice that the output jumps up at specific temperatures. So obviously the rounding is not happening. It's just giving me like exactly what the Fahrenheit temperature is, but I don't really care for this particular example. The user doesn't care that it's 0.000001 extra degree. So we'll just chuck our calculation in brackets and use the math.round to round it to the nearest whole number. This will just be a much tidier output for the user rather than seeing all those. We don't need it to 15 decimal places. It's just a hot chocolate. Much tidier. So when I'm scrolling around with this, I notice that 100 is at 212. So I don't actually know Fahrenheit off the top of my head. So I had to just check what 100 degrees in Fahrenheit actually is to check that the calculation is working. So 100 is 212, so that's working, and we'll check the other end. 0 should be 32, and the page had refreshed for some reason. If I go down to 0 degrees, it's 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's working. Those would be the boundary values in this case. The ultimate ends of both ends of the scale are the boundary values. So 0 we've checked, 100 we've checked, and now we can commit. So writing in our message, make sure it's tucked to the capital, I guess. Reactive values for the Fahrenheit temperature. Managed to get that one right. And in the description, I'm just going to put in a little note about those boundary values, just because they are worthy of noting. So there were only two in this case, 0 degrees and 100. And I'll just note in what they should be, and then struggle to write Fahrenheit. And it looks like I didn't actually notice that I did not spell Fahrenheit right in these commit messages. Managed to get the capital C, but not the N in Fahrenheit. So just writing in what the values should be, and then a quick little note to say that I did test them and they do work. So no one can accuse me of not trying those out. Still not going to commit, not going to push the changes up to GitHub yet, because the Svelte template does come with bold. We're going to add some styling. So with Bulma, it makes styling really nice and easy. You don't actually have to write any CSS unless you want something custom. We can just put in the classes and it'll apply those CSS classes to whatever we type in. A lot of the Bulma classes are very intuitive. You can see that if I want a title, I just type class title, labels are labels, inputs are inputs. It goes on and on like that. Buttons are buttons. It makes it very, very easy to make a very tidy page quickly. And so we just go through and add those in. Having a look for some other things that we might want to add. Decided to wrap the whole thing in a section, which just puts a bit of margin on both sides and makes it look a bit nicer so that the page doesn't go the full width, and trying to get out of old habits of using divs for everything. So this is a section, so it should be called section. So just rename that div and then put all of our code inside the section. The indentation didn't work exactly right, and you can use the automatic formatter for doing that, but the Svelte formatter is it's got its own style. It likes to add semicolons to the end of all of your JavaScript, and the if statements can look a bit strange. So I like to do it myself. It's good practice anyway. And the other thing was I didn't like how we wrote out degrees, so I thought we'd just use a symbol instead, which makes the output a little bit tidier. Less words is always better. And we'll just use the degree symbol. You could probably look up the code for it in HTML and like write out the proper code starting with that ampersand symbol. But I find it's easier just to copy and paste off Wikipedia. Add in the C to indicate what kind of temperature it is, and we just got rid of 3 big long words and replaced them with a couple symbols. Nice and easy. Having a look at the output. Looks pretty good. I mean, the input bars are really, really big now, but it's not worth trying to fix those right now. We'll just assume that we're designing for mobile. Looks pretty good. Temperature C, temperature Fahrenheit looks good. I think that the title, I didn't like the title, so I decided I'll use the Bulma Hero one, which is one of my go-to titles. Very big, very bold. It has a lot of impact without a lot of coding. And you can just Google Bulma Hero, copy the code, paste it in, and then just change the titles to the ones you want to be. So in this case, the title is Hot Chocolate, and we have to come up with, we'll delete the old title first, and then come up with a subtitle. I couldn't think of anything really good on the spot, so just how hot do you like yours? Having a look, looks okay, but could use a bit of color, and we'll just use the main Bulma color as primary. You'll notice it automatically changes the text and everything. It makes it so much easier to do the styling with Bulma. So all the code's looking pretty good. Styling's pretty much done. One last check. Do the slider. And what I think I noticed is I didn't really like that the output didn't continue on nicely. There was like a new line where the evaluation was. So if it says your drink is their temperature, full stop, new line, dot, 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 all that stuff. So I decided to move the paragraph end down to the bottom so that all of that would be on the same line. And VS Code was a bit confused with the autocomplete there, thinking that 40 was some HTML tag that I'd put in. Just correcting it to P, fix that up. And you can see that the evaluation is on the same line. And one last little thing to get rid of that full stop. Save. Final check. Everything seems to be working. And it's not the final check. I decided that the information in the paragraph, some of it was more important than the rest. So I decided to put the name in EM tags, which is emphasis. The problem was I couldn't remember exactly what Bulma did with emphasis. So I was just trying it out, because Bulma will have styled the EM tags in a particular way. So having a look, it looks like Bulma had done italics, and I didn't really like the italics. I felt like it didn't stand out enough. So instead of EM, there's another one for making things stand out, which is strong. And this one usually is bold. So changing all those to strong and having a look at the output. we should be able to see that the name is now like really standing out. So the two main parts of the output, the name and the temperature, those are the two ones that people will actually care about. Everything else will just skim over. So those two things will make them stand out. Quick note to add styling. I mean, the testing is pretty implicit, and with Bulma, there's not too much testing. Like, what am I going to do? Go in and fix the 10,000 lines of CSS? I don't think so. And because this is our last version, we're going to push it up to GitHub and have a look at online. So going back, we'll refresh the page and we can see we've got our 5 commits. And the commits are timestamped with the time that we actually committed it, not when we uploaded it. And one of the commits has notes on it saying about our boundary values for 0 and 100. And looking at the source file, which is the only one we added any code to, we've got all of our updates in there. Looking nice and tidy with indentation and everything. And that's our final thing. And the best part of any project is closing off the tabs that you had to open during it. So that'll do it for hot chocolate. A quick rundown of inputs, including like the range one, which is a bit different to what you might have used, and outputting, and the if statement, which is key for having a page that displays different stuff depending on what's in there.